Deven Fore, who goes by
Decaf.
something that I couldn't pronounce.
It's in the bottom
Decaf?
corner there, yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
He'll be presenting today about MAME, which is a multi-arcade machine emulator. He'll tell you more about that. He's also hopefully going to tell us a little bit about the Transistor, which is just across the highway, right?
Yeah, so we just moved. We've been around for about 3.5 years. Hackerspace, we were up in Midvale originally. You guys can check us out on our website, thetransistor.com. Lots of info on there. But yeah, just a local Utah hackerspace. We got a big location here, and then we also have another location up in Salt Lake. So, and then a small location in Midvale. So cool.
Out of the attic.
Huh? Out of the attic, finally, yes. And that was a big, enjoyable move.
Pretty cool spot.
It was a very cool building. I'm gonna actually run back there at some point and see what they do with it, because they're totally remodeling that upper space, and it should be really awesome. So as he said, I'm Deven Fore, and I'm going to attempt to present something on MAME. Since I don't have a whole lot of time these days, 99% of this was done between about midnight and 7:30 a.m. last night. So I'm not entirely sure any of it's coherent. So we'll just kind of flip through the slides, and I'm just glad that they have food to distract you guys with, so if it gets boring. So, all right. So there you go. No idea what I'm doing. And for the dog people, still have no idea what I'm doing. So here's the basic outline. Yeah. All right. So we're here at Plug. Who am I? What groups am I associated with? I'm Decaf, and I am associated with the Transistor, Utah makers, DC801. Probably have some ADHD problems, minor caffeine addiction, some glossophobia, and some procrastination. And of course, if you show up at a Plug meeting, you probably need to finger me. There you go. And since, yeah, contact info, if anyone's interested. There's my email, our website, and a couple of the IRC channels that I hang out in. You guys are probably familiar with at least the last one on the list. So, does anyone have any questions so far? Awesome. Okay, so what is MAME and what can it do? So, the aim of MAME isn't actually to play video games. The whole goal of the project is to preserve the hardware, like to so that they can preserve the way that it works. Oh, beautiful.
Windows fail.
Firewall. Good. Anyways, yeah, so the whole aim of it is to reference the inner workings of the machines to a point, and we'll get to that a little bit later. And as they say even on their website, the ability to actually play the games is just considered kind of a nice side effect. I feel like that kind of deviates a little from where they used to be, because originally the games, it used to run, I don't know, like 5 to 10 years ago. The project ran so much lighter, and it felt smoother, and now it's they've kind of pushed it. A lot of the audio stuff, you need the audio samples and some other things. So they're going for a accurate representation of the hardware rather than just being able to play the games. And none of the you can see everything's kind of because Google, when you full screen their stuff, it all breaks. And I didn't have time to fix it. First public release was in 1997. It now supports over 7,000 games. And a bunch of other things. Not all of them are playable. There's several side projects. There's MES, which is the multi-emulator super system, which will play all of the MAME stuff, which is the old arcade cabinets, but will also play the NES, Super NES, and a lot of the other consoles, Sega, some of the old video disc systems, and so on. And then there's another system that they're putting together that kind of brings the two together a little more, too. So, yeah, you can look into those. We'll just try to stick to MAME. MAME is free. It is open source. It's released under a modified version of the BSD license. you can't use it in a commercial setting. So I mean, you can't like build a MAME cabinet and put a coin door on it. For the most part, yeah. So yeah, you kind of could attempt to get licensing for a bunch of the games and roll a MAME cabinet, but then you run into things with like the Gaming Commission because you're accepting coins. You run into all kinds of other problems too, and you probably will never convince any of them to license the games out. So, not for any reasonable price, anyways.
So it's not MAME that's the problem, but the ROMs.
Yeah. So MAME just emulates the hardware.
You can run MAME on a commercial thing, but it's just a.
Yeah, you can run MAME on it. You can't sell MAME. Yeah, you can't sell MAME, and it can't be used because of the way it's licensed. It's not supposed to be used in a commercial setting either. So it's all written in C. The official source is Windows, DirectX, DirectDraw, all that fun stuff. I'm sure Plug just loves to hear about that. It has been ported to OS X, Linux, DOS, and several other side projects. So you can actually get it for pretty much everything. You can get the latest builds via Git, SVN, or just directly off their website at mamedev.org. The system requirements are fairly low, but it depends on the game and the hardware you're emulating. Some of it's really easy, and some of it, like especially newer arcade machines, are very trying to emulate current generation video game hardware on other hardware, even current gen, just like bogs them down really bad. So like your old games where you're running a couple 100K game, or up into the 40 megabytes or so, most of that stuff as a general rule will run on very low end hardware. But if you're running anything newer, some of it just won't play right. So basically MAME runs simulated CPU instructions on top of simulated memory maps and I/O spaces. And again, it's not for simulating games, but for simulating hardware. On what level does it emulate hardware? So these are boards. This is what like some boards and different chips look like in an actual original arcade cabinet. Some of them are different, like the Neo Geo systems had like a big main board, and then they had cartridges you could plug into them. And same with the JAMA boards. But basically what it does is they'll take like groups of chips and be like, this is all the sound chips, so we're going to emulate that under this one system for this board. And then they'll rip all the ROMs into the ROMs. So there's basically, they define, there's 3 levels. This is according to MAME. If you actually into simulating hardware, it gets much worse than this. But signal level in its truest form would be every single chip on there would be emulated, no matter what it was. Whether it's just some, anything, it would be, you would have to do every single chip, and every signal between each of those would have to be simulated. And even with, very simple games, even current hardware would just kind of, like, it just wouldn't even be able to handle it, because just the audio tracks and everything between and every single chip and tracking all the signals and timings, it's a mess. The next level, which is basically where MAME runs, is the logical level. And here they'll map out all the memory and different behaviors of some of the subsystems, and then that will they'll take the ROMs, and that will that's what lets you play the game, basically. And that's where most of MAME runs. And then the next level up would be a high-level emulation, where you're basically just saying, hey, the sound is supposed to sound like this, so I'll just implement sound here, and so on. MAME tries to avoid that. Some games it's unavoidable, but for the most part it avoids that. That runs nice and happy, but the games aren't exact how they're supposed to be. Because with a true rip, you're supposed to have, or a true dump, you should have everything, like all of the glitches, all of the bugs, any type of like weird memory happenings or crashes or anything should actually be replicated when you emulate that. So to install MAME on Windows, basically you just download it, unpack it, and execute it. It's super easy. With Linux, you have to install... Oh, with Linux, you basically have to install the SDL stuff, which is it's the Linux version of DirectX emulation. So yeah, and then you just execute it the same way, MAME. So we can, we'll show you that in a second. And again, Google kind of wrapped my top line there. So some of this. So ROMs, CHDs, and legal issues. ROMs and BIOS files, like as you get them, will be zipped, just normal zip. You place them in the ROM folder, and pretty much you just want to leave them zipped. The software itself will unzip them. You can unzip them into their own folder, and it'll execute there. And they didn't list it here, but the naming path for each of those files inside that is basically the type of the chip and then the location on the board. So if they have like, X chip top left, they'll name that like, XTL1 or something, 01, something like that is the scheme. And if you unzip the files, you can actually see all of the memory dumps from every single chip. So yeah, MAME, it'll extract them really fast. It does it pretty much as it's executing it. It can take a couple seconds, but it's super fast. So there's no reason to, some of the games can get pretty big if you leave everything unzipped. Then they're a lot easier to manage that way. So CHD files are not zipped. And you put those basically in a subfolder with the name matches. So if you had, and we'll get into what the differences are, but if you have like a ROM and a CHD file, basically you would just leave the ROM with the zip name on there and then make the new subfolder and unzip the ROM into that, or the CHD into that subfolder. So ROMs is your read-only memory. They're every chip, they'll dump it. They dump every single chip, and then that's zipped into one thing. That's your ROM. So any like smaller chips on the main board, anything like that, the main program, graphics, music stuff, that type of stuff goes into, that's actually the ROM. You place those in your ROMs folder, and then the game name. Oh, and that's not right. So anyways, basically ROMs, and then it'd be game name.zip. CHDs are compressed hunks of data. They're like the ROMs, but they're larger. They're usually the dumps from like CD drives, hard disks, that type of stuff. It's like large graphics files, audio files, videos, movies, that type of stuff. Those are CHDs, and basically, yeah, you'll have a folder name with the game name, and then the CHD name, and then .chd. And then the BIOS files for like any type of system where they had a separate BIOS for them, you need to put those in your ROM folder also. So if you want to emulate like a Neo Geo system, you basically need to get the Neo Geo BIOS, and it'll just be named like neogeo.zip, and you throw that in your ROM folder, and away you go. So yeah, ROMs will usually have different images stored in there. There's two types of ROMs. There's the parent ROM, which is basically your master set, and you need that to clone the sets. That'll have like all of the chips, and usually for the parent ROM, they'll use the most recent world edition of the game, if there is a world edition. And then the next type is your clone ROMs. And those will be like differences. So if there's like a Japanese version, or like an English version, or some other country, or language, or something that's intended for a different market, instead of ripping the entire set again, they'll just run a clone ROM and put it in there. So if you want to run like the Japanese version, usually you'll have to download the parent ROM and then the Japanese ROM also, and put them both in there. So some ROMs do require sound samples. For the audio to work correctly, they couldn't emulate it, or they couldn't get the data off the chips how they needed it. So they basically had to record them and put them in as samples, and then they're mapped. So, which brings us to the is it legal? Yes. Emulating the platform in itself is perfectly legal. A whole bunch of Sony BS that has proven that. So our ROMs, yes, ROMs are totally legal, provided that you either own the PCBs, you obtain a license, which pretty much everyone, they used to license them in like 2004, I think, and they've all basically stopped licensing them. They revoked all their licenses. So that's kind of a, there's also a whole bunch of them that have been released free to public, and you can grab those on mamedev.org/ROMs. So any questions on any of that? Keeping in mind I have no idea legally.
I am not a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. Okay, so the configuration, once you have it installed, the first thing you want to do is you want to run the create config. Let me show you guys that. And that just generates your default configuration. So, oh crap, I'm running Linux commands on Windows. Okay, so basically it's most of it is just the mame.ini file. There's a few other files that I've generated on there. And I'm running the 64-bit. And you can just run the cc create config. And you can see the mame.ini file is in there. You can also do fun things. There's a few other commands you can run. You can list all the games that it'll support with like list full. And so there's all the games that the MAME hardware supports. And you can, yeah. So if you can legally obtain a copy of those games, you can play all of them. So create your configuration file. You can edit the file directly if you want. Some front ends will do it for you. We'll get to front ends a little bit later. But the ini file will have settings for all your directories, like where you're storing your ROMs, your samples, your BIOS files, and so on. Your controls, how your controls are mapped. Are they mapped to a joystick? Are they mapped to your keyboard? Are they mapped to some separate device? You know, whatever it is. Your screen settings, tons of screen settings. Different resolutions, if you want scan lines or not, if it's stretching, if it's scaling, all that type of stuff. It's very in-depth. The basic settings work pretty good, but yeah, it can go pretty deep. Audio settings, logging, and so on. You can kick logging down as far as you want. It's yeah. So basically, once it's running, you can hit tab, and they'll bring up some basic MAME menus. So MAME itself has a menu system that you can use. I guess I can show. So MAME itself, if you launch it, I just threw like Neo Geo and some Neo Geo BIOS and some Metal Slug ROMs in here. But this is the basic one. You can configure the inputs. I guess I can launch a game. So the first time you launch any game, it'll give you a nag screen. If you want to download the files, it'll give you this nag screen. If you want to download the MAME itself, the source, there's diff files that you can apply and then build to remove the nag screens and all the annoyances. So, and then it gives you some basic info on the game, then you hit a key and it'll start. So, when arcade machines first boot up, they cycle through a lot of their video memory. They do some video tests and things too, so that the operators can make sure that they were running correctly. Then you can apply some coins and start your game. So we won't. Escape brings you back to there, or and then escape again would quit. Or you can hit tab. I guess I should show you that really quick. So tab will bring up the menu system, and you can set the general inputs, or if there's a specific, like the game runs a little different, and you need something different in there. Dip switches, so you can go in and set how many coin chutes there are, things, whatever was on the actual board, they would have little dip switches that you would set, like whoever the installer was would set a whole bunch of dip switches, and that would configure it. And I think they're actually giving me a graphical representation. Yeah, they are. So you can see there would be a set of switches on the board, and whoever was installing the game could set it. So you could set it to free play, or you could set the. Oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't know this one had that. And every game has different stuff. These aren't like generic settings. These are for every single game would have a different set of switches. So you can pull up bookkeeping info and all the cool stuff that would have been kept on the game that the operators could have pulled. You can, if you have more than one BIOS, you can switch the BIOS. So yeah, and you can set up your inputs if you want. A lot of the front ends will do your controls for you, but yeah, you can set. I mean, there's just massive amounts of stuff in there. So, any questions on that type of stuff?
by default, there are just certain keys that are certain controls for most games. Is there consistency?
So that there's a general configuration that it generates, and that's all in the MAME.ini. And then if you want to generate it for a specific game, so it just has like a massive list of everything it thinks you should need, and they're not super well configured, but you can kind of play them. If you want, like if you have a specific game that varies from that setting, then yeah, you can set it, and I believe it'll just set it in the, I think it goes in the ROM folder, I don't remember, as a .ini file. So yeah, and there's some other things that apply to saving high scores and things, but I don't remember exactly how they work. It seems like if you want to save high scores, it's another diff that you have to apply and compile from source again. I don't think that it saves those by default. So yeah. So any questions? Cool. Moving right along. Front ends. So purpose of the front end just makes it a lot easier to navigate. Mike has a front end running on this guy right here. You can also get the screenshots for every single game. They're available as just a download pack. It'll give you a basic screenshot. Some front ends will actually generate some of those for you, like on the fly. Like if you go over the game, it'll start emulating it, and it'll grab a screenshot. So there's tons of different emulators. There are front ends. There's front ends for Windows, Linux, everything. A lot of people will roll their own. So yeah, all the default ones are pretty configurable. It's basically just controlling MAME or whatever your emulator is. So it just grabs the screenshots, displays them. You can flip up and down, and then you hit enter or your first player button or whatever, and it just launches that game with MAME or whatever. So.
Do you have a favorite one?
Huh?
Do you have a favorite one?
So there's a couple of them. We'll go through a couple of them right here, but yeah, there's a few that I like the best. So. Yeah, most of them will also control other emulators. So if you've got MAME and like MES or Super NES, like SNES 9X or the Game Boy ones or any of those, yeah, they'll configure all of them. They can also, like you can see, he doesn't have to have a keyboard or anything on this system. So they kind of help eliminate some of the hardware too. If you don't want, you want more of an accurate experience. So here's some different, that's kind of the advanced MAME, kind of pulls in some stuff, adds some stuff in there. That one's for Linux. I think that just replaces some of the settings, makes it a little prettier. MAME-WA, I can't remember which ones are for Linux and which ones aren't, but there's the MAME-WA interface. A lot of them will also have different skins and configuration files, so you can actually move a lot of your like your previews, and if it plays sound. The machine we have down at the Transistor running will actually go into screensaver mode, and it just randomly picks a game and starts playing it. So it just hits the title screen, and then it'll change every so often, like 20 minutes or so, if it doesn't get input. So these are just some different ones. I mean, there's all different types depending on how you want your setup to be. And a lot of them will have configuration too, like you can download a different skin for them. So some popular Linux ones, advanced MAME, MAME-WA, and then I've seen people just roll their own, just run like a bash script that indexes your directory and then lets you select which one you want to run. So popular Windows ones, Mala is free. It's pretty awesome. Maximus Arcade is really good too. It's not free. I think it's like $15 or $20, and it runs a little heavier. It's pretty nice, but it does run a little heavier because it's I believe it's flash based. So yeah, if you've got a decent machine, it runs pretty good. So well, if there's any questions on the front ends.
Did you say which one you were running there?
We run Maximus Arcade. I didn't know about Mala, but we've played around with that a little bit. Maybe it's kind of like one of those things. We finished it, and so it just sits there now. But yeah, someday we might go back through and redo the whole configuration on that guy. So hardware, what kind of hardware can you run MAME on? Pretty much any laptop or desktop, even older hardware, depending on what you're emulating. any current gen console pretty much. I'm not 100% sure on PS3 since they pulled their other OS. And then you can get some little handheld devices that run Linux. Like the one on the top left is a GP2X, and those are pretty cool. They're little, I want to say it's like a 700 megahertz ARM or so processor. It's got some hardware acceleration for the graphics. Those run great. That's actually made to do that. I think they run like $125 or so. And then the little tiny one in the top is actually running a Raspberry Pi, which is shown in the middle there. And those are like $35 or something for a Raspberry Pi, and they're powerful enough to run it. You can run it on better hardware too. You can see it's got HDMI, a lot of other stuff. It also has some GPIO. If you wanted to use that for your controls, you wouldn't need a separate controller for that. So those are pretty cool. So different types of arcade cabinets. Your upright cabinets are the most common. Those are kind of the ones you think of, like the big Pac-Man arcades. 1 to 6 players, typically 1 to 4 players, and they are super heavy. So they'll be like these style. So the other next type would be like a console. I call them the console ones, where the screen is kind of separated, or like, the sit-down ones. I kind of throw into that same category where you're like sit-down racing game or something. Or like your DDR ones, like where they've got kind of more than one piece to them. Stand behind shooters, and then your cocktail table ones. So these were like really popular in pizza places because you could go in and get your pizza and then sit down and play video games for a while you eat. And just kind of like flat glass over the top, so you don't damage the machine. And then you've got your mini ones, or your bar top, your portable guys like this guy. Those were never like official. They did have some official ones, but they weren't very common. There's the Pac-Man one someone made out of Legos, and a couple other little projects people have made. So someone made a whole bunch of little tiny ones. Pretty cool. So if you want to build your own cabinet, you're going to need your cabinet. You can either build it or you can find one at a yard sale. Arcades will sell their old cabinets all the time, especially the non-working ones. It's kind of really expensive to get someone that actually knows what they're doing to get in there and fix them these days. So a lot of times they'll just sell them for like a couple $100. People sell them at yard sales all the time. They just want them out of their garage, $50 free. Craigslist, KSL will have them on there if you just want to start with a cabinet. Controls. You'll need your controls, your push-button joysticks if you want to do anything fancy like light guns or dance pads, steering wheels, so on. Hapcontrols.com. There's a few other places. Hap Controls is awesome. They have pretty much everything. Any type of arcade, pinball, even a lot of lots of stuff. So your basic hardware would be your joysticks and your push buttons. If you get them from Hap Controls, your joysticks, your 8-way, there's 2 different types of joysticks usually. More, but for basic arcade, there's 2 types. You either have a 4-way or an 8-way. So your 4-way joystick will only let you hit up, down, left, or right, but your 8-way will also let you hit them diagonally. And depending on the game, some people really hate the 8-way controllers because you'll be trying to move left and they'll jump at the same time, or whatever it is where you don't want that. There's also some hybrid ones that are a little more expensive that you can lift the joystick up and rotate it 90 degrees, and then it locks it into some channels where they'll only do 4-way, or you can flip it back and they'll do 8-way. Your push buttons with the micro switches on the bottom. Micro switches kind of snap on there after you get them in place. You can buy some different depths too. So if you've got a really short cabinet, you can buy them. You can get buttons that dome up or dome down. It just kind of depends on your preference. I like the dome down. I feel like they're a little more original. But yeah, they're about $250 a piece. And then the next thing you need some type of way, some way to control those buttons. So you need an interface here to your PC or whatever hardware you're running it on. One of the things you can do is take like an old keyboard and tear it apart and just use the inputs, so you get the little control board out of it and you map it all out and solder your connections on. It takes a lot of time and soldering, and because of the way they run in a matrix, so they'll have like 7 or 8 pins across and 7 or 8 down. You have to figure out where they are too, and then yeah, you just have to map it out. So if you're hitting like 3 buttons, it'll trigger the 4th button too. So it's really only good up to about 2 players, about 6 buttons a player, and if you want to get it that far, you really have to map it out really well. So lots of time. If you've just got tons of time or have no money, that's kind of what it ends up looking like. So, and that's probably one of the cleaner ones too. Newer keyboards, probably you just grab like the oldest keyboard you can find for free basically. Newer keyboards will have, instead of a full dip chip, they'll have the epoxy chip on board type of deals. And then you map it out. So you sit there and trigger each one of those inputs and see, you flip them over with like Notepad open and see what it triggers, or like one of the little keyboard testers. So, and then you map it all out, and then you'll build a grid and try to map them so that when they're hitting, up left and they hit B, it doesn't also trigger A or like second player down or something weird. So you can do native general purpose I/O if you want. Raspberry Pi has some of that. There's a couple other boards that have that. I'm not going to get too far into that. One of the really popular ones is there's a lot of interfaces you can buy that'll run PS2 or over USB. The most popular ones by far that I can tell are the like the iPACs from Ultimark. You could make your own if you're good with microcontrollers, pretty easy. The nice thing about the there's an iPAC 4. They're about $65. They're programmable, so you can take any of those inputs and tell it you want it to trigger any other button. It'll also let you do like shifting or something, so you can take any one of those buttons, and if they're holding that down, all the other buttons map something totally different. So if you want, like, they hold it down and then all the buttons on the keypad do all your different functions you want, you can do that also. And they're programmable. I think Mike is running one of their smaller iPACs in there. The iPAC 4 will do 56 inputs. It's for a basic arcade machine, it'll do 4 players really easy. And then they have smaller ones that are $30 to $40. So it comes with some really nice hardware or software to program it and map it out. So those are pretty cool. And they will
software running Linux, or is it?
I'm trying to remember. It seems like someone has made something for Linux to work with it. I think they have something.
So I played with MAME like 10 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a board from them. I'm pretty sure it was Ultimark.
Yeah.
It was a PS2 only.
Yeah, and so...
but I remember it was a Windows. You had to configure it in Windows.
Yeah.
And DOS.
And you might... I believe you can configure them in Linux. I don't know if that's from their official tools. Because it is just... I mean, I believe you're just sending it serial commands to program it. And so I think there are some tools for Linux. The Windows one is really nice because it has a whole graphical interface. And then you can also see like tables of what everything is mapped to. But it is, I mean, basically you just need any Windows box and program it and go. So, I mean, it holds the configuration on there. So once you get it how you want it, you don't have to, you'll never need a Windows box again.
So then it's just connecting up like a keyboard.
Yeah. So the nice thing with those, yeah, there's no masking or ghosting on there. So they won't block, like if you're hitting like, up, left, and B, it won't block second player from moving left or right or something. And it also won't force him to move left or right. So, and I believe you can hit every single input at the same time on those boards, and it'll read every single one of them. So if you're familiar with keyboards, it's full in key. So, yeah. Yeah, so then you need a computer to run it. You need your display. You need, if you want, lighting for the marquee, things like that. Your artwork. If you want to do a coin door. If you're doing a wood case, you're probably going to want like the T molding, the kind of the black molding usually that runs around the edges of the arcade machines. Any type of bezels for your screen, your latches. If you have a bigger machine, you'll probably want casters, screws, bolts, and probably a little booze. So then we'll and then the last part of the presentation I have is we'll walk through the build of our cabinet down in the Transistor. So we built a big 4-player cabinet. So we did a lot of design work. There's a second revision of this available on our Git page. It's just GitHub/the Transistor. You can download all the CAD files, take them down to a cabinet shop, have them cut them all, and put it together, and you're good to go. So if you want a giant 4-player cabinet, so yeah, we pulled in a lot of elements from different arcade cabinets, if you're familiar with several of the really popular ones. So we ordered all our parts. They got in. Looks like some of these have T-molding on them. It's kind of hard to see already. But basically we used a special router bit that will cut the slot to the side. And then you just feed all of the over it. And then you just pound the T-molding in with a mallet. Then in the bottom picture, instead of having them cut the plexi at the sign shop, we just had them cut the top control panel. And we just used a template router. And so you kind of just punch the router through, if you're familiar with that type of stuff. And then it just traces around the edge of your the board that's underneath it. So yeah, it's pretty messy. Prepare to get dirty. There's Max pounding some T-molding in. We just bought a big roll of it. So we just pounded it in and cut the extra off for all the pieces. We laid it out, put some glue on it, jumped on top. We did the glue and nail method. If you want it a little cleaner, you can put blocking on the inside and build it more like a real arcade cabinet. And then we just covered it up. We just covered the holes with black marker paint or something, and then slap stickers all over the side. So kind of depends on your goal and how nice you want to make it. The new ones actually go together quite a bit nicer. Tim kind of catted these up with no tolerances. The version 1. So the version 1 was really fun to build. I haven't built a version 2. One of the guys up in Midvale, a couple of the guys up there built one. They said it went together really nice. It's a lot skinnier, and then the base is deeper, and then there's less of a curve under the control panel. Actually, I think you can fit it through a 32-inch wide door if you take the door off now. The other one, you had to have a 36. For mounting the monitor, we had a piece that just has VSA mount holes in it, and then you basically just put the monitor in there, put the glass in, hold it up against the glass, and then put a couple screws in each side, and your monitor's in. So it'll fit any monitor, and it's centered exactly how you want it already. So yeah, more pictures. So for the display, what we did was we masked off a section of plexiglass that'll go on the back, and then we just sprayed the edges. So we measured out the exact monitor that we had, measured it out, put it in place, masked it off, painted the back side, and then you got to be really careful because it'll scratch easy. And then you just peel the masking off and install it. So here's Tim taking the thing apart, holding it in place. There's the monitor. You can see on the left side, the plexi is mounted, the monitor is just sitting down. And then the other side, what we did was we pushed the monitor up against it and screwed the screws into either side. So it was at the exact right place we wanted it. It's lined up perfectly with the bezel. And then we took the glass out on that one for some reason. So that's how that looks. Yeah. Kind of have to climb inside those things. There's our super high-end hardware. It's probably like a Pentium 4. And we actually have it made so you can mount nice speakers in there, but we're kind of cheap, so we just grabbed a pair of crappy USB speakers or something.
What OS you run in that one?
That one's running Windows too. It was just it was already on there. It's easy. It's probably running XP. It's just an old XP. It's probably stripped down a little bit. You can do all kinds of fun things, like you can strip the shell out and stuff. So it's MAME. It's not any type of Windows or anything. You don't see the OS. It just boots MAME. That's all it does. And then another nice thing is if you put like a Wi-Fi card in there and just have it connect to your network, so you can upload new files to it or whatever you want. So there's our control panel. We put all the buttons in there. Put all the all the little switches on the bottom of them, and then you wire until your hands hurt, and then you just keep going after that, and then you see it plugged into the iPack. And there's our control panel. We didn't do any special artwork or anything on it. All we did was the bezel on there, on the top, the marquee.
How
So
many joysticks did you use?
I think these are the competition ones. This was about 2.5 years ago. So I don't I don't really remember. It's just kind of there now.
Yeah. How many contacts per?
They're 8-way, so
they're 8-way.
there's 2 contacts per button, but the one is just ground, so you can just chain all of them together. And the wiring that we used was just because we used such heavy duty wiring just because it was what we could find, and it was what we had crimp connectors for, because we didn't want to like solder every one of them. But I mean, you could use like 22, 24 gauge, whatever. Would work easily more than enough, because it's just signal. So yeah. And then to hold the control panel, and we use these cool little latches. You've probably seen them everywhere. But basically, the whole control panel comes out. You can move it around. So we did that. You can see the 2 that grab onto the control panel. There's Dave licking the joystick, and yeah. So, and then I don't remember why we were doing this, but I have a ruler up in there. But you can see the
speakers?
For the marquee, I don't know. But for the marquee, you can see the glasses in there, and you buy this marquee strip stuff that holds the glass down. It's basically just like a hook kind of deal, and it fits over there, and then you put a couple screws in the bottom, and then your glass is held in, then you can slide your glass in and then put one on the top. So pretty much every arcade is done. So, and then I just had one of my friends that had a wider format printer print the marquees, and it just has a little light behind it and looks pretty good. And then you're pretty much done. Load your software and away you go. And that's all. So if there's any questions, I can answer them.
One question. If you do have some of these older games, where do you find forums for them? Do you create your own?
You can get your. You could. It's called dumping. It's not exactly the most easy process. You can look into it online. And if you're pulling ROM files on your own, people would probably be really happy with you. Especially people, because they don't just preserve like they're like the newest free version of the board. You can get like every revision ever. So if you have some revision that hasn't been documented by what the groups that collect them, they'd be happy with you. But it's not something. You have to be fairly electronically inclined to start pulling the ROMs off random chips.
Where else can you get them?
So internet. Yeah, I mean you can just.
Online backup.
So basically, anything you want is available on a torrent site somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've heard.
I've heard rumors. So. So cool.
Does it emulate the N64?
MAME does not. MES might, but I know that there are N64 emulators out there.
I've heard Project 64.
Yeah, so MAME and MES are focused at getting the hardware exact, the hardware emulation exact, and then kind of preserving a lot of the old hardware and the logic behind it. A lot of the other emulators are just made to play the games, and they'll have hacks like built in for specific ROMs to make every single ROM work correctly. And if you pull a list up, they'll tell you which ones will work and which ones won't. Where if they had actually done a full map of the hardware, anything would work. So any ROM that you put on it would work. So it's kind of like for Super Nintendo, there's SNES 9X and is really popular, and NES has one, and everything, Game Boy Color, Sega, anything, PlayStation.
Those require more more, or better hardware, or
So I think they require a lot less hardware because they're made specifically to play the game. They're not made to emulate the hardware. They end up emulating a lot of the hardware, but they also cheat a lot. So.
What are the biggest difference between MAME and MAME?
So MAME is made for all of the arcade machines, like the big, like coin-op games. And MES is all of the consoles. So MES is like Super Nintendo NES. And they actually have, I can't remember what the project is called, but there's a project that kind of combines the two of them. And it's actually ran by the guy that is mainly running the MAME stuff right now. So.
If somebody wanted to like make arcade or somebody who used like a light, would they do LCD games?
As far as I know, some of the hardware, some of it, yes, because I think that Ted and Isaacs had one in it, but I don't remember. So you can put the big CRTs in there. You can put the actual arcade monitors. Their yokes were set up different on the big CRTs, so they could actually be tilted without getting totally screwed up. Most TVs will handle some tilt, but if you do them like too much or too little, you can get some really weird issues depending on the monitor. And they're super heavy, especially if you want like a 30-inch screen. They're just like add like 200 pounds to your cabinet that's already like 300 or 400 pounds. It's just, yeah. So LCDs are kind of the way to go unless you want super accurate, and then you're going to get super heavy. Oh, cool. So MAME, I've ran the old MAME on probably as little as, I don't know, like 200, 300 megahertz. The newer stuff, I don't think I've ran it on anything lower than a gigahertz. And most of the games work pretty good on that. Neo Geo is pretty solid on a gigahertz, gig and a half with like 256 mega RAM. It's pretty solid, especially if you have some type of video like hardware acceleration. So yeah, it doesn't require a whole lot. I mean, a gigahertz machine is, you probably have several stashed in anyone's closet.
How well does the Raspberry Pi work?
You know what? I'm not entirely sure. I haven't tried it yet. I know.
You tried it?
You tried it?
Yeah. The really old games work.
Doesn't work on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that they're still trying to work on some of that with the porting, and they're doing some hacks just to make it work on there. So I don't know.
I would
suspect that some of the other like Super Nintendo NES, those types of emulators would run really good, but I'm not sure that they have ARM ports or not.
That's
probably true too. I know there's a big project working on some of that stuff now, but I haven't looked into it a whole lot.
I think a lot of things have gotten a lot of attention since Raspberry Pi came out.
Yeah.
Cheap megahertz.
Cheap megahertz.
The price cost
Exactly. And then they play with it.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of people just like to run like a Linux terminal on them too. They run those great. They'll do that all day.
When you start trying to do real quick.
Cool.
Well, cool. Any other questions?
Awesome.
Awesome.
Actually, I just want to say
not a question. Probably about like six. Well, no, probably close to almost a year ago. Probably 8 months to a year ago. Ars Technica had a really good in-depth article on like hardware emulation, like focusing on MAME and Project 64. So if you're interested, I'd recommend that.
There's also, if you guys want to get into it like a lot more low level, there's a lot of articles on building your own emulators from scratch. And so they're really interesting, but you'll definitely spend some time on it. So. And you're like, I can play Game Boy now. Could have just bought one on eBay for $20.
I think it was the name of the article is something like it's something involving 6 gigahertz on a Core i5 with MAME for emulator, 6 gigahertz, something like that.
Cool. Well, I think if anyone wants to play on here, Mike probably will let you. Calls it around.
More about the transistor.
Does anyone have questions about the transistor? I mean, I don't know what to. It's a hackerspace. We have a lot of tools down there. You can check us out. It's just kind of a group, kind of like Plug, but we have a dedicated space that you can have 24/7 access to and goof off and whatever.
Yeah, so
there's a monthly fee. Depending on what you want, it's anywhere from $40 to $75. Really, it's a group. Everything goes back into it. It's, I mean, fairly close to the Utah open source model. There's not really, it's not set up as a business or anything. No one. If it's a business, I'm doing something horribly wrong.
But yeah,
it's just fun. We've got lots of branches into everything. The Orem location has, I mean, we kind of do everything. So we'll do a lot of InfoSec stuff, a lot of programming. It's kind of a space to bring whatever down and meet other people and then work on something. We're still kind of doing build out now down there. A lot of it's done. Probably be another couple months at least before it's done, and we'll do like a big open house or something. But yeah, anyone who wants to get involved can definitely go down there and get involved with that. Our Salt Lakes, we also have like wood tools, metal tools, laser cutter, vinyl, heat press. We've got 3D printers. We've got some smaller CNC routers. They're like, I think the 3D printers and the CNC routers are like halfway set up because no one's got around to it because we've been doing all the build out. Like we just moved in November from Provo, so we've been building walls and desks and stuff down there. Nice big location. But yeah, so
meeting room space,
everything. Yeah. So everyone gets their own personal desk. I mean, it's not a huge area, but you get your own desk and some storage and a shelf to put stuff on. And there's a shelf up above your desk, so you can put a machine up there. And then the Salt Lake space, they don't do personal space up there. They're in a little more of like an office environment type like this. We're kind of like in between a warehouse and an office. It's like nice warehouse space. But yeah, the Salt Lake group, they do. You can if you join one location, you can pretty much go to the other ones whenever. You can go get keys to the Salt Lake space if you want them. But they have a heavy focus on information security, and so they do. They'll do like cryptography. They do the ongoing like the Stanford cryptography classes. They do CTFs pretty regularly right now. They came down and did one in Orem a little while ago. I know they're going to have another one up in Salt Lake in the next probably month. They do lock picking. They're involved with DEF CON, Black Hat, all of the different cons. So yeah, they do everything. Yep.
Are members allowed to have events there at the facility?
So
if members want to do events, they just need to bring it up at like a member meeting. I know that we have one group that's probably going to start. I mean it's meeting space. We don't care, but we'll. I think there's a Utah robotics group that's going to start doing meetings there. I think so. Depends on when you go there. There's probably not going to be anyone there. We kind of meet on Tuesdays and Saturdays. If you want like a tour of the space, just hit us up on the forums and set something up. I'm on IRC all day, and sometimes all night, probably more often than not. And so yeah, you can contact us on there, send us an email. We have a mailing list you can join. It's one of the Google Groups mailing lists. So.
Do you mind kids there at all?
Kids are fine.
Kids are fine. They have to be supervised and depends on how you feel about cursing and things. It is a hacker space, and it's mostly adults there. So I mean, a lot of members are fine bringing their kids down. You do have to keep an eye on them because there are things like table saws and things that are not safe for.
Yes.
Yes. So, yeah. Definitely.
Do you have any kind of meetings that people come to?
We do monthly public meetings. We're probably going to start doing bi-monthly public meetings. We'll usually have a member or sometimes even non-members pick a topic and do whatever. So we've done things on like composite materials, OpenVPN, Dwarf Fortress, NetHack. If you look at the we're going to try to plan out this month. We're going to try to plan out 6 months in advance. I know that there's a Dwarf Fortress thing coming up January. We usually do it first Saturday of the month, but we'll probably do first and third Saturdays. So for our public events, it kind of varies. It's usually around 6 to 7 when they start, and they usually run till like 9, and then everyone just kind of hangs out till 10, and then we'll just do whatever after that. It kind of depends. So.
One of the projects that's going to be done probably within 6 months is a word clock project. Members is designing all the boards and stuff for it, and we have a bajillion shift registers lying around. So we're going to little kits to sell them to at the class, go through the process of how to make it.
Oh. And I totally forgot that there's also the guys in Midvale, the guys that kind of run the Midvale space, have a 5-foot by 10-foot CNC router there, and they're going to be cutting cabinets about this, but out of wood. And they'll have everything but your computer and monitor, and they'll be selling those for like $200 or something. We'll make a post on our website. So they'll have your joysticks, all of your wood, it's laminated, your molding, and your control interface. So they'll be between $200 and $300. And I know they want to do an upright, and then they're also going to do a mini cocktail table. So if anyone's interested in that, just kind of keep an eye on our website or join the mailing list, and we'll send out notifications on that. Thetransistor.com. And it will be updated. It's kind of scattered right now. But it's one of those things that we just kind of like throw it up there, and if it works, it's awesome. Yeah. So. Yeah. It's kind of a lot of anarchy going on down there. If it becomes a job, we just stop doing it. We've got a lot of projects that I've kind of like, they fall into that category, and so I just stop doing them. So. Cool. Cool. We'll yay!